You know, when I teach in the classrooms, I tell lots of stories to my students, stories and stories and stories. The way I teach economics is by telling stories. But unfortunately, when I'm given or when I have chosen the clips to be only 15 minutes, I can't tell you stories. So, but today, I'm just going to tell you stories and nothing else but stories. And that's how you will at least get to understand how exactly banking system came into picture. Okay. So the first thing, how the guilds were made and groups were made and bank as an institution, how it came into existence. So one part is the governance part of it. The second part is the principle on which banking works. First, the governance part of it, then the principles. So first, the governance part. Okay. So this is now the exploration era, 15th century. Ships started getting made in Europe, which could actually undertake very long trips. And together with those ships, one more thing that the Europeans had made was guns. So they had guns and they had ships, and they went off. They went off to explore the world. And as you know the history, they first discovered Africa, and then they discovered the America, which they called India, and then they realized that this is not India. So then it was some newfound land, and then names given and whatnot. And then I think it was 1487. I'm not 100% sure. A guy called Vasco da Gama. Of course, you have heard about him. So Vasco da Gama starts his ship from Europe, goes around the Western Africa, takes a turn at Cape of Good Hope, and from Atlantic enters the Indian Ocean and goes further and further and further, finally finding the dream land that for decades they were trying to find a way for. Destination, India. Found it. Okay. You know the thing? Vasco da Gama came with, started from Europe with 4 ships. And he lost 2 of his ships in the sea due to, there are so many storms in the sea and there are so many other things which happen. So he lost 2 of his ships. So out of 4, he had only 2 ships. When he went back home with those 2 ships, the amount of gold and jewelry and the expensive things which were there in the ships made up for the loss which was made by 2 ships. Shipping was that very profitable. Every time the ship sailed out, as I told you, with the guns, whether they reached Africa, they looted that. They reached South America, they looted that. They reached Latin America, they looted that. They reached America, the United States of America now, they looted. Whoever had anything which was wealthy, whatever was offered by the land which was very, very expensive, they would take it, loot it at the point of gun, and come back with the ships laden with goods which were so expensive. And when they started noticing after the first few trips of the ships, which were basically funded by the royal families, after that, people started noticing that this business is not too bad. But how do they care whether they have looted or not? We were looted. As far as they were concerned, they were the looters. They were getting the money. How did they care? So they realized that shipping requires money. And you can't always rely on kings to supply the money. So over a period of time, people who were wealthy started coming together, forming groups. And these groups pulled their resources together. So they had a lot of money. A lot of money enabled them to allow 1 ship or 2 ships to go. So they started giving out this money. And when the ships would come back, this money together with the interest would be given back. was turning out to be a very profitable business. So that is how banks were formed. The so-called first banks were formed in form of guilds, which where people came together, pooled their resources, and then started giving money, started giving credit. So banks in that form started first with giving credit. Okay, so that is how they all started working. They did not call themselves banks yet, if I'm not mistaken, but this entire business started. This was one principle, and this was one story. The second story is a fictional story, but it kind of tells you what exactly happened as far as this principle of banking is concerned. And now I'm going to take you back to 11th and 12th century. I told you about IOUs. I told about promissory notes and things like that. Remember, I told you. So we will go back to that 11th century and 12th century, those days. So we will talk about one Indian state, एक बड़ा व्यापारी जिसको मारवाड़ी सेठ होते थे और गुजराती भी सेठ हुआ करते थे, सेठिया. So there was this big set whose business was flourishing, and he had his trade going on in many kingdoms of India. And so he used to receive a lot of wealth, and he used to write a lot of IOUs, a lot of promissory notes. It used to be, incidentally, I don't know the word in any other language, in my language, Gujarati. It was called hundi. Hundi, we did not call it IOU or promissory note. Those are Europeans. We called it hundi in Gujarat, and I'm sure there are names like this in other regions also. So he used to be giving lots of hundis and things like that. And over a period of time, people started coming to these setiyas to even put their money safely. Say I have sold my building, or I have sold a big piece of jewelry or something, and I have received a lot of money, which I don't want anyone to touch. I might have very greedy relatives or whatever, but I don't want it to be touched. So I just go and give it to the Sethia. The Sethia gives me the receipt for it, and I am happily going. So two types of things. I want to travel and I give my money, or I just want to keep my money safe, whichever way. So the money used to come to these Sethias like that. So one day what happened was that this was the end of the year period, Diwali, I think. So they were closing all the books of accounts. So when they were closing the books of accounts, they realized that there is a huge chunk of money missing. And huge chunk of money in those days amounted to just hundreds. Now it would amount to lakhs. But in those days, it amounted to some hundreds. And the Sethia was very shocked as to what happened. And then he suddenly realized that 6 months ago, one of the workers who was dealing with this cash and keeping it in the box and things like that, that person had disappeared. And they did not realize that he had disappeared with such a huge sum of money. The sage initially was very, very angry and very frustrated and whatnot, fuming with anger. But he was a sage, a businessman with a very acute sense of business. So the question that he asked himself on the next day was that for 6 months, almost 30% of my money was not there with me, and I didn't even notice. So that means that I can give out that money to others, and my business would still run exactly the way it was running before. And this, my bachas, is the knowledge which a lot of people all over the world who were into the business of writing these promissory notes and IOUs, who were big business firms, started realizing that when people come and put their money with them, it is not necessary that they will come very soon to claim this money, which means that at any given point of time, there is a chunk of money which would be lying unused, which I can use for my business, which I can give out as credit, earn interest on it, and I will get that money back. And by then, if those persons come, I would be able to give the money. This is the principle on which banks are founded. This is the founding principle, that you take deposits from people. You work on the assumption that people are not going to come back to claim this money immediately, which means that you can safely give out this money as loans to some other people, and you will keep receiving those loan money back, but you will earn interest also on it, and you will be able to meet the demand for deposit holders by keeping some cash for them. So this is how banking is done. Banking starts with putting in some money, but receiving a huge amount of deposits from the public, then keeping some cash for honoring the claims of the depositors. The rest of the money is loaned out. And when that money is loaned out, the interest comes. From that interest, the bank runs, because interests are the profits for the banks. This is how banks work. You understood? It's a difficult principle to understand, but I hope after listening to that story, it becomes kind of clear in your mind as to how these banks work, right? And now you understand why they say that a bank is always bankrupt. Because, as I told you, banks work on the principle that everybody who has deposited money with me is not going to come claiming that money. Only some will come every day, only some. So I keep some money and I'll be fine. But if everybody comes, then there is no way the bank can honor that claim, because as I told you, almost 70% of the deposits are actually loaned out. The bank doesn't have that money. So a bank is always bankrupt. The bank functions based on the assumption that people are not going to come to claim this money. If everybody comes to claim their money, which is called a run on the bank, if that happens, then the bank becomes bankrupt in time. Okay, so I don't think that I have time now. Maybe I think I have finished my 15 minutes. So I will tell you another story very soon, but I will end this session right now. Okay, so very soon, the next story, it will be another session of only story, even if very brief. We'll keep it like that, finish it off, and then we will go into the technicalities. Okay, fine. So have a nice day, guys. Bye-bye.